Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 7, Episode 18, Till Death Do Us Part. This episode aired April 14th, 1999.
Surprisingly, this was not an episode of the classic British sitcom featuring the character Alf Garnett. Very much a show of its times.
Ah, much like this episode, in fact. Well, before we talk about this episode, anything to say about last week's episode, Penumbra?
No, it was perfect.
Yeah, the podcast was perfect. We do get a last time on in this episode to remind us of what happened last week. Ezri rescues Worf, sleeps with him, and then they're captured by some Breen. Sisko proposes to Cassidy, and then has his prophet mom tell him that he can't share a path with Cassidy.
Prophets are jerks.
And worst of all, Dukat becomes a Bajoran.
Yes.
Although really I could have just ended with, and worst of all, Dukat. No more description needed. The Bajoran thing was just like terrible icing on a terrible cake.
Well, should we get into the episode?
We should.
Okay. We start with Jake asking his dad if the prophets told him why he couldn't marry Cassidy.
The prophets never say why.
No. Jake states that it's none of their business, but Ben tells him everything he does is their business.
Yeah.
He's not yet told Cassidy, who's currently on a cargo run, and Jake is just not very happy about this whole situation. And Sisko delivers a great line saying, "Jake, you're not making me feel any better."
No, he is not.
And just to make things even worse, Kira calls, telling him that Kai Wynn has arrived.
And he does that thing that he always does now when he hears about Kai Wynn. He puts his head in his hands for just a second, and then he's like, okay, let her in.
Tell him I'm out.
Yeah. He could have snuck out the back door.
Yeah. Well, Kai Wynn has come to assist in the preparations for the wedding and is in absolutely fine form. She has decided that it's more appropriate she should carry out the wedding ceremony, and she'll talk to Vedek Talna, who Sisko and Cassidy wanted. And it's really no trouble for her to do this.
Yeah. Regardless of what you want, this is what I want.
I loved as well when she said, "I think you'll agree."
Yeah, she says that, and she doesn't wait for Sisko to agree. And he doesn't agree. He doesn't say anything.
Well, the look on Sisko's face in this whole scene is priceless.
Yeah.
He really managed to give up this sense of, if things just couldn't get any worse, and she shows up.
Well, and he knows that he can't say no to her in this situation.
No,
Yeah.
that's even worse, yeah.
And this scene, or at least this conversation with Sisko and Kai Wynn, I mean, it's another classic of two titans in a great scene together, where she is just throwing out her usual ego and guilt,
Yes.
and Sisko is being evasive.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, Wynn does manage to pick up that something is wrong, although I'm surprised she was actually paying attention to anyone else.
Yeah.
And Sisko tells her that he had a vision, but he doesn't tell her the whole story. He just says they warned him he would face a trial.
Right.
Wynn is also just so upbeat through this whole scene, and it's a complete contrast to Sisko. Wynn being upbeat is just disturbing. She's normally only this happy when one of her acolytes has murdered a rival for her.
Oh, yeah. She does at least acknowledge that Sisko always does what the prophets ask of him. I thought that was pretty big of her for a change.
That was.
That must irritate her to have to say that.
I can't take that as genuine, though. I can only see Wynn going through the motions and saying the right things.
I think she's had to say that a lot ever since that battle on the promenade with Costamogen, because everybody continued to tell her that Sisko was willing to sacrifice his own son to listen to what the prophets wanted.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she was in ops trying to stop the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, she was willing to preserve her position.
Right.
Well, as Kai Wynn is leaving, she is suddenly pulled into a vision. One of the prophets, appearing as Kira, says, "She will serve us well," which I thought was a little bit ominous. And then a prophet appears as Sisko, saying, "The Sisko has faltered. You must bring the restoration." The prophets continue and tell her the guide will lead the way, saying, "He will come to her, and he will have the wisdom of the land." All the while, Wynn is very confused by what any of these things mean, and the Sisko finally says, "Bajor's fate will rest with you," and the vision ends. Back in the real world, a disoriented Wynn says to Kira, "The prophets, they spoke to me." and into the opening titles.
This just isn't fair. I mean, she has no way of knowing that it's the Pa Wraiths because she's never had a vision before, but this is clearly the greatest day of her life. She's been waiting for this.
Oh, yeah.
To her credit, she hasn't lied about having a vision, but now she's had one, but I don't think those were the real prophets.
That's my question here. When I was watching this with you, the first thing you said was, are we sure those were prophets?
Mm-hmm.
What made you think that was in question?
I suppose you could look at it like Sisko is arguing with them over Cassidy and the path, and so they maybe would go to someone else and say, oh, he's faltered. But that has never happened before. They have full, I don't know if it's faith in Sisko or they just believe Sisko it's his destiny.
Yeah.
And I think that even comes up in this episode. But it was the way the Kira prophet said that she'll serve us well.
Yes.
Because that's never what the prophets have said in any of the other visions. So it just had a different tone and different language.
I would agree. She will serve us well. That was the bit that was off.
And then also because what happens later, you know. But in the moment, I believed it was the Pa Wraiths. Yeah.
Yeah. We go back to the very cool-looking Breen ship where Worf and Ezri are prisoners. Ezri is picking on Worf as all his plans for escape have not worked.
That was cute.
She also speculates on what the Breen might look like under their helmets, wondering if they're furry. And Worf informs us that no one has ever seen one has lived to speak of it.
I didn't realize the Breen were Mandalorians who never take their helmets off.
Yeah.
Also, I guess it's also cheap this way. We just use a helmet. We don't have to come up with another alien design.
What they could have done, which would have made it awesome, is have one take their helmet off and underneath it would be Carrie Fisher.
That would have been funny.
Should we point out the continuity issue at this point?
All right, point it out.
Let's cast our mind back to the episode Indiscretion.
Mm-hmm. Which episode was that? What happened?
Season 4, episode 4. That was where Kira and...
and
Dukat end up on that moon in the Breen mining colony.
Right.
Dukat and Kira disabled 2 Breen and took their uniforms and sneaked into the base wearing the uniforms.
Oops.
So they must have basically taken the Breen out of them. So maybe nobody asked Kira and Dukat, so what do Breen actually look like? There's 2 people must have taken a look at Breen.
Or they come up with some convoluted story where those weren't really Breen. Those were other prisoners who had the uniforms.
They sneaked in and took spare uniforms.
No, that is a very good continuity problem, which I don't even remember that. I would have had to have gone, because you mentioned there was some continuity error, but I didn't know what it was. And I'd forgotten all about that. But yeah, you're right. That's exactly what happened.
You know what's funny is I didn't actually realize this until basically the rewatch now, because I suddenly went, wait a minute. Weren't Dukat and Kira in Breen uniforms? And I went back and watched, and yes, they were.
What season was that?
Season 4.
Well, I mean, it would have been years before. The reason you remember it here is it would have been less than a year. Yeah.
The writers are under a lot of stress. They've got a lot of episodes to write.
Yeah.
Back to the holding cell, and Ezri is making a joke, and Worf tells her that she is a lot like Jadzia. He tells her, I thought I'd lost her, but you and I will have many years together. Ezri doesn't say anything, but her look isn't very encouraging.
Yeah, Worf already.
He's totally jumping the gun a little here.
Assuming he and Ezri are spending the rest of their lives together.
It does seem on brand for Worf. He is very emotionally immature.
And this is why connecting across hosts is such a bad idea.
Well, especially with Klingons. Well, especially with Worf, I think.
Yeah. The Klingon comes out.
Worf puts the Kling in Klingon.
He does.
Next, off to Cardassia, and Weyoun enters Damar's quarters, and we see this whole shot framed in a bottle. And Damar is very hungover. Also worthy of note, this may be a candidate for the worst hair in an episode award.
It really was bad. But I mean, it was supposed to be bad. They did that on purpose. I really laughed that when he wakes up, he's in bed in his full uniform. And I love how it's like they don't know what the rest of the alien body would look like, or they don't want to spend the time or the money on that makeup. And so they just put him in their uniform all the time.
Headcanon here. You pointed out all the way back when we first started season 1, I think it was even in episode 1, how do you think the Cardassian beds are sculptured so that they actually sleep in their uniforms and they just slot in?
I really hope so.
I'm thinking, this may be a pointer that the beds are actually like that.
All right. Wow, that was episode 1. That's right. When we talked about the beds, yeah.
Well, Wayoon tells him that they need to leave this afternoon. And when Damar objects, saying he has things to attend to, Wayoon drops the bombshell. You mean your business with Ducat? He asks Damar what he's up to masquerading as a Bajoran.
Yeah.
But Damar doesn't know, and Wayoon calls his loyalty misplaced. He then leaves while Damar takes another drink from the bottle.
He doesn't have a lot of things to do. He has a lot of drinking to do.
I gotta get some drinks in, and then meet with Ducat.
Meet my girlfriend. Then I'll have to get some more drinks.
Yeah. Damar is now meeting with Ducat the Bajoran, and has arranged transport for him. Ducat admonishes Damar, asking what became of the man he knew, and that Cardassia needs a leader. Damar replies that Ducat could be the leader again, but Ducat tells him the Pares have shown him a different destiny, and he wishes Damar good luck, and they part.
I do hope that Ducat shaking Damar helps to get him back on track. I mean, he is a mess.
Well, yeah, he really did admonish him of what had he become.
He's obviously just feeling hopeless and he's drowning in booze, right? I remember my dad telling me a story once of one of his employees, and boy, this would have been, I don't know, maybe in the 70s, who had a drinking problem and was really screwing up at work and was mistreating his family. And my dad claimed that he just sort of did this. What Ducat did was like shook the guy by the shoulders and just told him to get his life together or get out. And decades later, that guy really looked at that as a turning point in his life and was really loyal to my dad because of that and really looked up to him. I don't think I would have ever believed that just sort of a single conversation could have that effect. But I don't know, my dad claimed that story happened.
Interesting. Yeah, I've not really come across anything like that. I mean, I heard it anecdotally, but I don't know anyone who has. It seems like it's a little bit of a simplistic view.
It is, yeah. But don't look at it simplistically, because it could just be one of 1,000 things that lead to that. And that's just the last thing. Yeah. Or that's the one thing that finally caused that person to have a change in thinking. But no one can stop another person from drinking. They can only choose to stop themselves. And even sometimes they can't do that.
Yeah.
There's no way that one person just sort of shaking you is going to stop it. I mean, the person has to want to. And maybe this particular individual was just at that point. And I hope that Damar is at that point because he is pathetic.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But part of the problem is Damar is he's the middle manager who's always been in someone else's shadow.
Yeah. But he took the title and he didn't have to.
Well, because he wants to feel important.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's skilled at it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've seen that before in this show and in real life.
So true. Cut now to a shuttle arriving on Deep Space Nine and getting off, looking very smug.
Oh, my God.
Is Ducat the Bajoran.
Alarm should be going off. I mean, how does okay, maybe you don't recognize him because his look has changed so much. And the only reason we recognize him is because we know what the actor looks like.
Yes.
But he has a very distinct voice. And he hasn't done anything to change his voice. And his DNA would still be the same. I mean, why can't we check for anything?
They should have a scanner and check for undercover Cardassians.
Yes. If you think now about sci-fi, more modern sci-fi, which is funny, there's a lot of identification involved. Right, where they're scanning your eye or they're scanning something to know who you are. And in the 90s, none of that was going on.
That's a good point.
Yeah. He's essentially cosplaying as a Bajoran and getting away with it.
It's a really good Bajoran cosplay.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he'll do Trill next. Now in Cisco's quarters, Cassidy is showing Cisco a Navaran shawl, which apparently is good luck if you wear one at your wedding. But Ben is very distracted, telling her, "We need to talk." And Cassidy says, "Why do I get the feeling I'm not going to like this?" My comment here is, you didn't tell her the second she got back?
No, apparently not.
Sometimes Cisco is honestly the worst boyfriend or fiancé.
And also, I feel like he could have worked on his delivery.
Yes.
Or, maybe turned it into a conversation like we need to talk about this vision that I had and then discussed it.
Right.
But that's not what happened.
Yeah. Cisco tells her the bad news, that Sarah told him the path that I walk is meant for me alone, and he would know nothing but sorrow if he ignored her warning. And he continues, "She's worried for me, like a mother would be."
Mm-hmm.
I think Cassidy should have replied, "So your mom doesn't like your girlfriend. What's the big deal?"
Exactly. That's got to be true 80% of the time.
Maybe this is because she's just afraid of Captain. Remember last week Jake made a comment, there seemed to be a little bit of subtle classism there of looking down on freighter captains.
Right.
Why, is it because they're working people? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with a freighter captain anyway?
Nothing. She's got a good job.
Cassidy asks, what's he going to do? And Sisko tells her he loves her and he wants to be with her. And she replies, then be with me, Ben. But he tells her, I can't go against the prophets. Cassidy doesn't say anything, but takes off the ring, picks up a bag, which is another one of those giant duffel bags, and leaves.
Well, maybe he did tell her then immediately when she got back, because her bag was still sitting by the door.
That's true. Maybe she did come straight there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll give him that.
All right.
This whole scene, such a great performance by both of them. Avery put so much feeling into that. It was so good to watch, although also bad to watch because of what was happening. It's another one of those scenes where you just feel the weight of the galaxy on Sisko's shoulders.
Yeah.
And the way Cassidy just doesn't say anything when she leaves. My note about this is a scene that is felt, not watched.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It was definitely a well-acted scene, but it was just sort of cruel, I thought, the way he handled it. And at some point, she has to be thinking, I could do better. I mean, Sisko is great at being a captain. He is not great at being a boyfriend.
And good at being an emissary as well. Well, he's okay at being the emissary.
It seems like now he's better at being the emissary.
I guess that's a big part of the problem. You're dealing with somebody whose duty and obligations always come before you.
Yeah. And they're things that you can't really know or understand. You're really just taking his word for it.
True.
Because they're coming in these visions that nobody else sees.
Oh, gosh. Because, you could be asking yourself, is he interpreting this the right way?
Yeah. Is he being manipulated somehow? Is this really a cult that he is somehow involved in?
Oh.
I don't know.
Back to the Breen ship, and Ezri is now having a nightmare. Her and Worf discuss dreams. Worf, as a Klingon, thinks they should simply be ignored. But Ezri says they're important. They contain valuable insights into your subconscious. She explains how, in this dream, she was being pursued, and when the pursuer takes off their helmet, it's Bashir.
That seems pretty accurate.
Yeah. Ezri tries to analyze what the dream means, and I think it means Bashir is a dangerous stalker.
Mm-hmm.
But before they can discuss it further, the Breen return and stun both of them and drag Worf away, leaving Ezri alone.
Ezri saying that the cave in her dream could symbolize the womb. Oh my God. I mean, that's a bit much.
Yeah. I think we are seeing here that the Jadzia part of her personality is being left behind, and we're seeing Ezri now.
Yeah, but what ancient books has she been reading? I mean, is this Freud? If we're truly evolved in the future, I don't think we're teaching Freud.
That's a good question.
We don't know how to write counseling and psychology.
I guess not. Back to Deep Space Nine, because we are cutting all over the place in this episode. There's so many stories going on simultaneously. Anyway, on DS9, Kai Wynn now receives a visitor who wishes for an audience, and her assistant brings in Gul Dukat, who's now going by the name Anjol Tanon. Dukat is really playing things up, saying he just wants a blessing because he is a simple man of the land. Wynn takes the code word of the land and grabs Dukat's ear without asking, as you notice.
Of course.
Telling him, your power is strong, and then leans in saying, I've been waiting for you.
Has anyone ever grabbed an ear and said, wow, dude, your paw sucks?
Wow, you're like pure evil.
Oh, man.
So now any question of who that vision was made by has been answered.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose they knew this, but Kai Wynn is going to be thrilled about what the so-called prophets told her because they said Sisko faltered. This is all she's ever wanted.
Yeah, they're playing into everything she wants.
Mm-hmm.
Dukat is now having tea with Kai Wynn, and he plays a little bit of false humility, saying how it's not right that a Ranjan is serving a common farmer. So a little bit of classism thrown in there, a little bit of structural hierarchy.
That's pretty normal for the Bajorans.
I guess the problem is the Bajorans aren't really that far away from a highly structured society where you knew your place.
Yeah.
Dukat now spins a story to Wynn about how times are hard and Rogath Blight destroyed his crops and those of the province. Kai Wynn listens to this and equates it to Talnot's prophecy of the final days. The land shall be poisoned by a great evil. He goes on to tell her how the crops have to be burned and then the land left fallow for a season, which allows for the restoration of the soil, which is another trigger for Wynne, who says, the restoration, the poison must be purged so the land can be reborn. She now tells Ducat that the prophets spoke to her, telling her that they were going to send him there. She says, you are blessed. You've been anointed to be my guide.
Yikes.
Ducat feigns that he doesn't understand any of this, and Kai Wynne says, she's going to make Bajor great again. Oh, no, wait a minute. She says, you're going to help me bring about the restoration of Bajor. Ducat plays a little bit more of that false humility, how he's just a simple farmer, and Wynne is just totally suckered in by this whole thing. This is another, I think, really well-acted scene. Alaimo playing Ducat as this fake farmer, simple man of the land, just sort of works really well. And how he's preying on Kai Wynne's desperation to do what she thinks the prophets want. And Louise Fletcher just displays that self-assured arrogance that is such a hallmark for Wynne. She's quoting which prophecies work for her in this situation.
Right. I find it hard to look at Ducat.
Off to Sisko's office, where Kira is giving him an update, and Sisko is being very crabby. But at least this time, he recognizes it and actually apologizes to Kira. He now tells her about the prophets, saying he and Cassidy can't walk the same path. The ever-faithful Kira tells him, they wouldn't ask without a reason. And Sisko replies, you'd think they'd tell me what it is. I laughed when Kira said, well, it doesn't work like that.
And you know it.
Yeah. I will say, for someone who is part prophet, Sarah said, you're part of me. I do think maybe an explanation is owed.
Yeah.
Sisko isn't convinced that this is the right path and delivers what I think is my line of the episode, where he says, they say marrying Cassidy is a mistake. Maybe it is, but it's my mistake to make. Kira, once again utterly bound by her faith, says, I wouldn't go against the prophets. You're doing the right thing.
They didn't exactly say marrying Cassidy was a mistake. They just said that she can't walk the same path.
Yeah.
And that his destiny is difficult. She does say, though, his destiny isn't to be married to Cassidy.
Yeah.
Though, again, this time thing confuses me, because why would marriage make any difference to the prophets at all?
Oh, there we go.
And if they really didn't want them on the same path, this one thing, this marriage thing, wouldn't make any difference to them at all. And I would argue that the path is a concept of moving through something. And they don't understand that, according to episode 1 of this entire series. So I feel like they've maybe lost their way a little bit with how the prophets would look at things.
Yeah. They look at things from outside time, unless they need to look at things in a simple path.
Yeah. Kira makes a good point when she says the prophets haven't let him down before. However, what do they know about sorrow and time? I just would argue very little.
Yeah, their understanding of the corporeal seems to vary up and down.
Yes, it does. The only other thing I would say about this scene is that Kira was not the person to ask if you wanted someone to say you should ignore a vision.
No, yeah, exactly. You don't discuss Bajoran religion and the prophets with Kira.
Or that's not what he wanted. He wanted somebody to say, yeah, you're doing the right thing.
That's true.
Jake didn't do that, and Cassidy didn't do that, but Kira was definitely going to do that.
Yeah, that's almost a cheat. Kira is going to side with the prophets.
Well, she also gave up her relationship because the prophets told her that...
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right, that she wasn't supposed to walk the same path as Shakar, the hair guy.
Maybe the prophets are just jerks and like to mess with relationships.
Do they ever say, yes, you should walk the path together? Or do they only say, oh, you shouldn't do that?
You shouldn't date him. He's terrible, yeah.
This was also a good scene.
Cut to a Jem'Hadar ship, and on the bridge, Weyoun and a First are wearing those migraine-inducing flashing viewers. Just watching that is like, oh, that'll give you a headache.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the evil founder joins them, and she is looking really rough. Even her clothing is now crinkly.
Yeah, and she can't even walk straight.
Right, she's clearly starting to lose cohesion and is almost stumbling around as she walks.
Mm-hmm.
She asks when they'll reach the rendezvous, and Weyoun sucks up a little bit, saying her plan is brilliant and will turn the war in their favor.
Yeah.
But we're not given any hints about who the rendezvous is with or the purpose. She also gets a dig in at Damar, describing him as most trying.
Yes.
She's just not very pleasant, I think, is the problem.
No, she's very good at this role, too.
Yeah. And Wei-Yoon is such a great suck-up.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the Breen ship, and Worf is now spouting nonsense and acting like he's having a bad dream. Ezri asks, "What have they done to you?" When Worf recovers, he tells her that the Breen took him in for interrogation and were using some kind of cortical memory probe, and he lost consciousness. Worf also does his usual thing of beating himself up, saying he should have done more to resist, and delivers the most stinging Klingon rebuke of, "These Breen are without honor."
These couple of moments in this episode, I think it happens like 3 times where somebody Worf or Ezri is shouting something in their sleep. Or in this case, it's not sleep, but he was unconscious or whatever. But
delirious.
It's a very weak plot ploy, I would say, in the absence of better writing.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all.
Interesting.
Do it once, but they do it 3 times.
Worf now rants a bit about how this is intolerable, and Ezri gets annoyed at him, telling him this is no time for Klingon chest thumping. And I think if you're a Klingon, any time is a good time for a bit of chest thumping.
Yes, all time.
Well, the Breen return, and Worf tries to resist, but is quickly beaten to the ground with the stun sticks, and now they drag Ezri out. So none of this is going well for either of them.
Yeah.
On the station, Dukat is now having dinner with Kai Wynn, and she's got out the good wine. She says this was going to be a wedding present to the emissary, and then delivers one of her classic digs saying, "But I doubt he would have been able to appreciate it, not being Bajoran."
I absolutely love that she decided to open the wedding gift instead of give it to him. That is brilliant.
Oh, that is so on character.
She can convince herself of anything, this woman.
Yep. Well, Dukat runs with this theme, saying, "The prophets may have chosen him, but he's not really one of us, is he?" And wow, Dukat is pushing all the right buttons with Wynn here, as she replies, No, he isn't.
It's hard to believe that someone in her position would be so naive as to be manipulated so easily. I do get it. I think it's easier to be manipulated by someone who you agree with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just saying all the things that she would say.
That's, exactly it.
Yeah, and they added the Pa-Wraith vision to it. All right, I talked myself into it.
Dukat continues the theme, saying, "I wonder if he truly understands our people."
Oh, the irony.
Yes. Wynn tells him, "The prophets chose you as my guide. You must speak your mind freely." Dukat now goes into a total role, saying, Sisko never suffered through the occupation. He has no idea what the Cardassians did.
Oh, God.
Those years left many scars on Bajor's soul. So how could he help heal what he could never comprehend? Wynn replies, "She's often asked herself the same question."
He just makes me squirm.
He is great. This is the part I think is so well written. Dukat now starts spinning a story about how during the occupation he was scheduled to be executed, but the shuttle he was on ended up being rerouted because the dispatcher misread the orders. Kai Wynn reveals it wasn't a mistake. She'd bribed the dispatcher. Dukat kneels in front of Kai Wynn saying, "You saved my life. Even then, our fates were linked." I really like in this scene how Alaimo's whole tone is changing subtly. His persona is transforming from this simple farmer into that much more confident, utterly manipulative Dukat. He's playing on all her prejudices. It's that creepy side of Dukat so being put to work here.
Yep, he is leading her right to the fire.
Oh, yeah.
And she's willingly following.
Yeah, she's buying all of it. In Sisko's quarters, he's asleep on his couch, and in the foreground is the model of his house he wants to build, with what looks like a straw roof. And maybe this is just living in California, but that's a total fire risk. I think we're a little bit sensitive to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Quark interrupts because he's brought Sisko the ring he ordered. And in a classic Quark style, he says, "It's non-refundable." But before he leaves, he says to Sisko, "It'd be a shame to let something so beautiful go to waste." Sisko lays back down on the couch, looking at his dollhouse, and sighs. Another quick cut back to the Breen ship, and Ezri is suffering from the after effects of the interrogation, like Worf. And this is your third mumbling in their sleep scene.
Yeah.
She finally says, "I love you," and then, "Kiss me, Julian." Worf looks a little shocked by all of this.
That made me want to vomit.
And we get a total soap opera dramatic music.
That is something they would have done on a soap opera.
Oh, yeah,
That's
completely.
How ridiculous it is.
It felt like a soap opera scene,
Yeah.
especially with the way the music swells at the end. Another cut back to the station, and a sleeping Kai Wynn is disturbed as Anjon has arrived, insisting to see the Kai. He now tells her a story that, on his farm, moba saplings are suddenly sprouting from the soil, which is impossible because they only planted a week ago. He asks, could this be a sign? Wynn tells him it is a sign from the prophets, that his farm will thrive under his brother's care, because they want you at my side. And she takes his hand. She asks him to call her Adami, and Dukat turns on his predator charm, saying, what a beautiful name, and touches her face. She tells him it's all right, the prophets brought us together, and she leans in and they kiss.
Ugh.
I could hear Kim from the other room shouting, ooh, at this point.
I mean, she looks great without her hat, but this is creepy. I'm not sure I can explain it entirely, but it absolutely creeps me out.
Oh, it's disturbing.
Because he's not who he claims to be.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's manipulating her. It's really, really gross.
It's everything that the degenerate nature of Dukat is coming out in this
with Bajoran
scene.
women. Ugh,
Yeah.
God.
Is it crazy? I actually feel bad for Kai Wynn at this point.
You should. She's being manipulated in multiple ways.
We remain on the station, and Cassidy, in a seriously cool purple and green suede outfit.
Oh, yeah. It's nice.
Well, she's getting her ship ready to depart, and
Yeah.
Sisko comes into the cargo bay and says, I made a mistake. I don't care what the prophets want. I want to marry you. We'll worry about the rest later. She tells him, don't do this. Not if you're going to change your mind again.
Yes.
And Sisko says, I won't. I love you. And they hug. Then he takes her by the hand and they leave the cargo bay, with Cassidy asking, where are we going? In the wardroom, all the usual suspects have gathered, and Quark is complaining about being a caterer with only 20 minutes notice. Miles gets his one line of the episode in, saying, perhaps Worf and Ezri were held up getting a wedding gift. A little bit of dark humor from him.
Yeah.
Kira does not look very happy about any of this, and Odo cracks a joke telling Kira, usually when we come to these events, you have to remind me to smile.
Yeah, she's looking glum, but they're not having a Bajoran ceremony.
No, they are
So
not.
the prophets shouldn't care and Kira shouldn't care.
In theory, this would be a Starfleet civil ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're all non-believing atheists. So what does it matter to the Bajorans?
Exactly.
Very good point. Odo tries making a little small talk and almost jokingly says, I hope the prophets forgive them. And Kira, 1000% deadpan, replies, so do I.
Yeah, and she means it.
Oh, yeah. None is a single line, and she delivers exactly what we need to know. We hear a bosun's whistle, and Nog pipes Cassidy into the wardroom. Admiral Ross is conducting the ceremony, because I believe Sloane wasn't available. As the ceremony progresses, Kira is looking really concerned.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they didn't have a bit where he asks if anybody objects, because I'm pretty sure Kira would be at the front going, yeah, one here.
Yeah. The prophets?
Just as Sisko is about to put the ring on Cassidy's finger, he is pulled into a vision. A very annoyed-sounding Sarah tells him, this is not meant to be, Benjamin. And I notice she dispenses with the he is the Sisko bit when she's telling him off.
Yeah, just like a mother.
Yeah.
Benjamin something Sisko, whatever it is. We heard his middle name before, but I don't remember it.
Sarah tells him, your trial is at hand. You must be strong. And Sisko replies, Cassidy gives me strength. Why can't you understand that?
Yeah.
I don't think the prophets really have any concept of what a partner can really mean to you.
No, they don't. And they don't care.
She repeats the line, if you do this, you will know only sorrow. He tells her, you shared my mother's existence. You must have some understanding of what love is. You must know I will never be happy without Cassidy. Sarah tells him, your path is a difficult one. I cannot change what is to come. And Sisko says, I know. She then holds Sisko's head in her hands and pulls him close to her, saying, be careful, my son. And the vision ends.
Oh my.
Wow.
That also felt like manipulation.
I don't know.
I still question this whole thing as saying a path and you can't change what is to come. This is to know time.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is how timeless beings would see it.
Interesting.
I say confidently thinking like a timeless being.
After the vision, Sisko seems to pause for just a moment, and then with the tiniest hint of a smile, puts the ring on Cassidy's finger, and Ross declares them married.
This was no Klingon wedding.
No, it was not.
Not enough melodrama.
Oh gosh, no. They didn't even have to fight with swords or anything.
No.
Back to the Jem'Hadar ship, and a very annoyed Damar demands Weyoun tell him where they are going.
He's like, I'm out of booze. Can you at least tell me what we're doing?
I'm out of booze. There's no smokes on this ship. Oh, what's going on?
My girlfriends aren't here.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Weyoun sucks up a bit, saying he's the leader of Cardassia and deserves to know everything, and he thinks Damar will be very pleased.
I'm sure.
Back to the Breen ship, and Worf is being extraordinarily pouty, even for Worf, saying he should not have trusted her with his heart, and that she has dishonored him and herself.
Oh my god.
He is being like a 10 out of 10 on the whiny teenager scale.
Yeah.
And what's even worse, he can't go to his van and pout.
Yeah.
Ezri is confused by Worf's attitude, and he asks, how long have you had these feelings for Bashir? I think the correct answer is, go to hell. Ezri is still confused by all of this, and Worf tells her how, when she was delirious, she spoke Bashir's name and said she loved him. Ezri replies she finds him charming, and she didn't add, in that kind of serial killer sort of way. And Worf says he should have known. Jadzia had feelings for him too. Ezri gets really annoyed at this point and shouts at Worf saying, would you stop comparing me to her? I think that's completely fair.
Well.
Fortunately, before we get any more of Worf's annoying emo teenage ranting, the Breen return, and they all beam onto the Jem'Hadar ship with Weyoun and Damar. The Breen says something to Weyoun that we can't understand because they just sound like a series of tones when they talk, and we learn they're giving Ezri and Worf as gifts to the Dominion. Weyoun, very much on form, says, how thoughtful, and goes on to tell Ezri and Worf, you should be honored. You're witnessing a historic moment, the birth of the alliance between the Dominion and the Breen.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they are.
It changes everything. And we close on a very concerned-looking Worf and Ezri, with Weyoun smiling and hitting, I think, what must be 11 on the smug scale.
Yeah, he's very high on the smug scale.
The end, or rather, to be continued. But they don't actually say that.
It's implied. Well, that was dramatic.
Yes, it was.
Do you have over-analysis?
Yes, I do. I'm going to leave the point about the wedding and marriage to you.
I have a few things.
First thing, I think Sarah is actually starting to feel the human spillover of her having been a human. That's why she's reacting the way she is and saying the things that she's saying. Maybe it's affecting her more than she intended, or even worse, more than she wanted to. So she's having these feelings about Ben. Effectively, he is her son.
Yeah.
And that's why I think she's behaving the way she is.
Well, she even uses the term I, right?
Yeah.
She even says, like, I gave you life, which none of the prophets have spoken like that before.
Yeah. And when she actually uses his first name and calls him Ben, it implies she has understanding of what a human is.
Yeah, that's a really good overanalysis that I hadn't put together, but you're right. She's reacting more like a human would. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of heartbreaking when she says, be careful, my son. She actually admits it.
But if she's acting more like a human, then you also have to accept that your human children are going to make mistakes. You can't make every choice for them.
And I think maybe that's part of the parent thing, part of the being a corporeal, a human, that they're having such trouble with as a prophet. Of parents don't like it when their kids make mistakes. The prophets aren't even prepared to handle that. They have no reference point.
Yeah. It's hard to watch, though. It's hard to watch them tell Sisko that, oh, you want to be happy? Oh, sorry.
No, you can't.
We've decided that's not for you.
We don't like our children to be happy.
Right.
Thinking about that, I mean, they're almost as bad as Worf as a parent.
Similar. You're not doing exactly what I want you to do. You're a bad child.
Exactly. Next thing. If I were a Breen, I would be getting my leaders checked out to make sure none of them are changelings. Seems a little suspicious.
Good point.
Next thing. Weyoun's motivations on Cardassia. If he knows Dukat has returned, like an unloved season, why isn't he doing anything? I mean, what's behind this? I was thinking there's a few possible reasons. Because the founder is sick, he's just distracted. There are bigger fish to fry. The next thing is maybe he'll let Dukat think he's safe for a while and then surprise him and execute him. And then maybe it's hubris. Maybe he's just, well, Dukat can't do anything to hurt us. He's inconsequential and just doesn't really understand that Dukat whenever he turns up, can be some kind of disruptive threat.
The only time that the Dominion has not quickly used execution as a solution is when it involves our main cast.
The writers wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
While true, you could spin a tale of Dukat escaping by the skin of his teeth with the Jem'Hadar in tow. This way, it just seems to be, why doesn't Weyoun care?
Yeah.
This guy screwed everything up at every step.
Yeah.
And you're just like, let him hang out as a Bajoran, it's fine.
I don't know. I agree. I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah.
It would have been better if Weyoun hadn't known, honestly. And that also would have been good because it would have shown that Dukat was clever enough to avoid the surveillance.
Yes, right.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Next part. Great move on the part of the Power Wraiths. Wynn already hates Sisko,
Yeah.
and they played completely into her ambition.
Yeah, they really did.
She didn't even question the vision.
No.
And when this guy just turns up, she doesn't investigate him, doesn't look into his farm, doesn't do anything.
Yeah, doesn't even ask for a picture.
They knew exactly how to get her.
Yeah. The vision first.
Yep.
Since she'd never had one, of course, that was going to change everything. And so then after that, she was looking for signs everywhere, and she saw them.
Exactly. And leading on from that point, maybe controversial, maybe these aren't Power Wraiths. Maybe these are other prophets who are annoyed that Sisko would consider going against their wishes and getting married. Rivals within the temple.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think so, though. I think it's the Power Race. Just because it links up so well with everything Dukat has been doing and saying.
That's true.
Yeah.
That one's a little bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think my final point is, we've seen a precedence for this before. When Admiral Stuffed Shirt Ross forced Sisko to make a choice between leaving the station to fight the battle or following the Prophet's warnings, it got Dax killed. It caused Costamogen to be released and a whole ton of trouble. Does that point to perhaps I should listen to them?
Well, I suppose it does. But also, I think the message, it's so open to interpretation. I can see his point. And he doesn't want to just be hurting the people in his life either over it.
Yeah.
So I do get it. If you think about sort of what you said earlier, that the Sarah prophet was acting more human.
Yeah.
He may have picked something about that up, too, and just be like, this isn't normal to have my mother talking to me this way.
Yeah.
So maybe that changes it. Maybe he's seeing what you're saying, that her judgment is weirdly clouded by her humanity.
Interesting. That she's trying maybe to stop him having pain.
Yeah.
If she'd gone back to when he met Jake's mother, would she have said, yeah, don't marry her? You got a few years and then the Borg kill her.
Well, I doubt this is what's happening, but a possibility is that all romances, all relationships, they all end in sorrow and tragedy.
Oh, Watchmen.
Maybe it's that.
How does it end? Like all relationships. In tragedy.
Exactly. That was like a completely heartbreaking moment in Watchmen, but also something to reflect on.
Yes.
And go like, oh my God.
That's a good point.
And if they have no concept of time, it will end badly.
So if you looked at it in the long term, if you were outside time and you lacked, if you like, an understanding of humanity, you could say, why are you getting involved, Ben? It'll just hurt you in the end.
Yeah.
Wow.
And looking at how his first marriage caused him sorrow, right?
Avoid roof beams.
I mean, again, I don't think that's what it is, but I would buy that.
That is a good take. Okay, I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, wraps up my overanalysis. I know you have a few things to say. Over to you, Kim.
Well, I only have one thing in overanalysis, and then I have probably what you're looking for under women in the future. But I really don't think the prophets would care about marriage. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it has any meaning to them. It really makes no sense that it would have any meaning to them.
Why would actually marriage make a difference?
I don't think it would. Exactly. I don't think it would. Well, so let's go to women in the future. And really, I guess what I want to talk about here is Worf and Ezri.
I just tried to put that out of my mind.
Well, I don't understand why Dax's entire character has to be wrapped around romance. I don't get it. Why does she have to have a boyfriend? I just don't understand why that is the entire character. That's like an entire side of this character, both when it was Jadzia and now when it's Ezri.
Yeah. It feels very soap opera-y, doesn't it?
Well, yes. And we sort of took the weakest path to create and then destroy this connection between the two of them. If we really had to get them together, which honestly, I don't understand exactly why we had to do that, but I get that we had to find a way to sever their bond. That makes sense to me. It would have been so much better dramatically to have them get together in some way and then both be torn apart by how it's not the same.
Oh.
She's not Jadzia.
Yeah.
I think it's terrible for Worf to suddenly just forget Jadzia and be like, well, she's close.
Yeah.
I mean, after that wedding ceremony and the joining of their hearts and all of that, right? This is such a letdown that he's like, well, she's kind of like Jadzia. She's nothing like Jadzia.
You know, that's a really good point because you could play both sides of it with Worf going, she's not Jadzia, and Ezri with, I don't feel the way Jadzia felt about Klingons.
Yeah, I would much rather have seen the drama of how it feels wrong and for them to have sort of a dramatic acceptance of Jadzia is just gone. And they could have done that together. It didn't have to be separate, right? It could have happened together. Maybe something like that is still to come. But this was a real cheap handling of this story, especially with how much I really like the Klingon wedding and all of that part of the story. This is just, to me, really disappointing that they've handled it this way. It really is like a soap opera or really childish.
It feels cheap.
To me, they kind of ruined 2 characters, maybe even 3 characters by doing this. And as we're winding towards the end of this series, I don't want to leave with this sort of taste in my mouth, but this is what they're doing. This is a mess.
It's hard to disagree. It's one of those areas where you see the potential. It's almost like it's not even a swing and a miss. It's like they didn't get out of the dugout.
Yeah, exactly. It was we forgot the bat in the dugout. Well, I have a little bit more to say about the Cassidy-Sisko wedding, but I'm going to save that for my rating. I'm not going to say it here. So let's just go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I'm going thumbs up despite its flaws. There was some great acting in here. I love the interaction between Sisko and his mother. Dukat is just wonderfully creepy, and Louise Fletcher is always worth watching.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If you reach a point in the story where you actually feel sorry for Kai Wynn, you feel some sympathy for her, even if it's her own flaws that brought her to this point, it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I do understand that. She's definitely brought to this point because of her flaws and her willingness to believe the garbage that is being shoveled at her by Dukat and the Power Wraiths.
And by somebody who's so horribly manipulative.
Yeah. And he seems to us, of course, so transparent.
Yeah.
So has she never crossed paths with Dukat? Is that what we're supposed to believe?
Either that or he's extremely well hidden.
He can't hide that voice. His voice is so distinct. Well, I'm not thrilled with this episode. I want to be, but I'm just not.
Yeah.
The Dukat and Wynn stuff, that's a thumbs up. And I like the drama that it's building, right? I think that's good. And I want to see where that goes. I think that's good. But the Worf Ezri stuff, it's really terrible for so many reasons. I think it also wrecks Jadzia. I just think it's terrible.
Yeah.
And then their handling of the Sisko marriage, to me, is really lame. It's like we're so stuck, not just in the 90s, but like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you know, in that sort of era. And we're not even considering that marriage would be or could be different 300 years in the future. But even at that time, there were options.
Right.
I just don't get why we have to look at it like this is how marriage and relationships work forever.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Right.
You could have tried a little harder.
Yeah. It's a very traditionalist approach, which is strange for a show that's supposed to be set in the future, that this is your only option.
Do you remember the thing about the prophet saying that he would find no rest on Bajor?
Yes.
Did they say that to Sisko?
Yes. Yes, they very specifically said to him, because he'd build his house and it would keep on burning down because of the straw roof.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So why is he picking and choosing which things he's really listening to?
Well, he hasn't actually tried to settle on Bajor.
But he's planning to. He's bought the land and he's going to build that house.
But they haven't made an attempt to stop him at this point. So although they say those things...
I just feel like he's already, even whether or not he marries Cassidy, he's already had that warning.
Right.
So why is this any different?
That's a really good point, and I had not considered that at all.
Yeah.
If Kira is upset at the idea of him having this wedding, then surely she should be equally as upset at him building a house when they've told him he can't rest on Bejor.
Yes, because it's the same prophets.
I had not considered that at all.
So I'm really torn.
Yeah.
I want to like this episode because I like where it's going.
Yeah.
But I think they really failed on a number of fronts here with not just short-sighted, but just narrow-minded writing. And we've boxed our characters into a 90s corner that they don't need to be in.
I think almost a traditionalist 1950s corner.
Yeah. And the soap opera stuff with Worf and Ezri, I mean, it just really brings this episode down for me.
I just try and put that bit out of my mind.
Yeah. I'm not going to thumbs down it, but I'm going to neutral it.
Yeah.
It's not good enough, especially where we are in the overall arc here. We should have done better.
Which is sad considering the great performances in this one.
Yeah.
I can understand your take on that completely.
All right. Wow, that wraps up Season 7, Episode 18. I hadn't expected to be this much of a bummer about it. When I watched it the first time, I felt a little bit differently, but that second time when you're really taking notes and you're really paying attention, that's when a lot of times when your opinions, I think, are really formed. And I was not thrilled when I was taking notes.
I think you see a lot more of the flaws. And it's a flawed episode.
Yeah,
I still liked it, but you can't get away from some of the negatives.
I get why you liked it. I do. And you're allowed to.
And I get your points as well. I can't defend them because they're just bad.
See, people, this is how marriage works. I have an opinion, and it's okay. James has an opinion, and it's okay. And we're just going to get on with our lives and go to the next episode.
I get the marriage thing. I feel like that whole part of the episode was stuck in the past, fully in the past.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Probably 1961 in that casino on the holodeck.
Oh my God. Totally. With the women dancers and the cocktail waitresses. Yeah. Great. It's a great place for us to be.
I think that finally wraps up my waffling.
All right. That wraps up Season 7, Episode 18. Come back next week for Episode 19. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on all the social media platforms, including YouTube, at ReBingeIT. If you want to join the Facebook group, we are at facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.